Anyone with a butt can enjoy anal play. Okay, keep going. Stop, pause, breathe. Do not start with the penis. Okay, you can keep going in very, very, very slowly. And so I'm going to tell you my story of the first time that I tried to have anal. Woo! Like a completely like make you see stars kind of experience. Percent of women enjoy receiving anal sex, but 77% of women have had some sort of negative anal sex experience. 52% of women have orgasmed during anal sex, and 29% find vaginal and anal sex to be equally enjoyable. You know, the thing about anal sex, anal intimacy is there's so much curiosity about it, especially typically the male partner, but there is a taboo around it. There's a lot of misinformation around it. And, you know, some of the myths are, I can't believe it's still a myth. It's 2024, 2025. But, you know, that anal sex is only for gay men. And that is 100% not true.
Perfect. It's like you look at the size of a pinky versus the size of a penis, right? It's like, oh, this is okay.
This position makes a huge difference. And of course, the vision that most people have of anal sex is going to be the number one thing that anal sex needs is, and I made mistake number one.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Lounge. I'm so thrilled to invite back a former guest that I've been continuing to work with in various ways, the suburban sexologist, board-certified sexologist, Amy Rowan. Thank you so much for coming back with me today.
Thank you for inviting me back. I always love our collaborations together, and I'm really excited to dive into today's topic.
Yeah, we got a juicy topic for the audience, and it's something that I've talked about on my YouTube channel, but really I've not talked much about on this podcast yet, and people ask about it all the time. So we're talking about anal today, anal sex, anal pleasure, and I know you have a whole presentation prepared for us, but before we go in, I think your story of how you got into the world of sexology is so beautiful. And so I would love to hear just a little bit about your story, about how you left corporate America and just kind of your journey as a stay-home mom into the world of a clinical sexologist.
Absolutely. I think the first question I always get asked is, how did you get into this? And, you know, I always like to say I feel like I was born to do this because my dad, now retired, he's an OBGYN and my mom is a psychologist. So they had a baby and it was me. But, you know, my journey there wasn't quite that direct. And, you know, initially I graduated from college. I did human resources for several Fortune 500 companies and then got pregnant with my first child. And my husband and I made the decision for me to stay home. So my last day of corporate America was the day that my water broke. And then I was a stay-at-home mom, and which I loved. And I'm very grateful, you know, for that opportunity and that privilege. But any moms can probably relate. At some point, you kind of get tired of 2 feet or smaller people yelling at you all day long. And I just needed to get out of the house and I wanted something that was mine. And I went to a sex toy party and learned so much. Like that was actually where I learned about the G-spot at that first party. And my eyes were wide open and I said, this looks like a lot of fun. I want to try this out. So I became a sex toy consultant. And it was great. It was phenomenal, especially I had 2 more children. So I'm a boy mom. I've got 3 boys. And, you know, I was still staying at home with them, but I could work on the weekends. And I built a team and I earned trips and, you know, that whole thing. It was a really beautiful addition to my life. But at the end of so many of those parties, a woman would come up to me and say, Amy, my husband and I haven't had sex in a year. Or, Amy, sex is painful. Can you help me? And I knew that selling a product was not going to be enough of a solution to help them. And that broke my heart. And I really, really, really wanted to do more. And that's what led me to go back to school and get my sexology certification. So I really enjoyed doing the parties. It was just a great flexible way for me to be able to stay home with my children and really, really help people. But at the end of so many of those parties, I would have a woman that would come up to me and she would say, Amy, sex is painful. Intercourse is painful for me. Or my husband and I haven't had sex in a year. Can you help? And I knew that selling a product was not going to be enough to help them, that there was deeper work to be done there, because sexuality is obviously a very, very, wide-ranging, multifaceted experience and challenge. And so that's what led me to go back to school and get my 15-month, 750 course hour sexology certification.
Nice. Amazing. Yeah. And then let's jump from there into our topic today. And maybe let's start. I know there's a lot of things on your mind to talk about, but maybe let's start with taking some of the myths and the taboo out of it if we could, and then we can just go into your presentation from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the thing about anal sex, anal intimacy is there's so much curiosity about it, especially typically the male partner is usually pretty curious about it, but there is a taboo around it. There's a lot of misinformation around it. And, some of the myths, that I think are one of the biggest myths is just start with a penis. Do not start with a penis.
Right.
You definitely never want to start with a penis. You want to work your way up to that. And that is something that we will talk about. I've got a whole step-by-step guide. Another huge myth that I bust constantly is, and actually this happened a lot at my parties, is women would come up and say, my husband wants to try anal. Can I get some numbing cream? Do not use numbing cream. That is an enormous mistake. The other story that I would get in my parties, because I did lots of them for ER nurses, and trust me, they wanted to tell me all the stories.
Yeah.
Is that someone would have used a numbing cream and they would not be able to feel the pain. And pain is our body's way of saying something is wrong. So it's very important to feel that. So do not ever use numbing cream. When done properly, slowly, you can avoid most of the pain. And we'll talk a little bit about pain tolerance within that. And another thing, it's sort of along the same lines, so just get drunk and try it. It's really good to have your wits about you. So you are trying this. So, so those are just a couple of the big things that I really like to talk about, when it comes to sex. Anal intimacy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's so much just you want to be present. You don't want to push beyond your limits. You want to make sure you can feel things. I think some really important, just basic guidelines there.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to lead us today? Let's get into the presentation you prepared.
Sure. I think the three biggest questions I have always gotten are, is this normal? Tell me about the G-spot. And let's talk about anal, because people have the most questions about that. And so I like to always lead with a story, because people also think, oh, as a sexologist, you must have always had this figured out. And that is 100% now the case. I have made just as many mistakes as probably the vast majority of you. And so I'm going to tell you my story of the first time that I tried to have anal. And I was with my long-term boyfriend. We were in college, and I made mistake number one. We were drunk. And he was like, well, let's try it. And I was like, okay. Well, that was it. That was the extent of the conversation. And then we tried it. Well, it did not go well. In fact, I literally flew off the bed because it hurt so much. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was awful. I will never, ever try that again. And that was that. And I think I would expect there's probably a lot of other people that have had similar experiences to that. And so there's a lot of people who are like, this is just off the table. This isn't something I want to try because it's going to hurt. But, I like to also, share some stats. And so there was a study, this is from the Bad Girls Bible, and they showed that 63% of women enjoy receiving anal sex. So if you enjoy this, there's nothing wrong with you here. You're in the majority of people. But 77% of women have had some sort of negative anal sex experience.
That's an important stat.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people are like, I don't want to try this. But another thing that I like to share is 52% of women have orgasmed during anal sex, and 29% find vaginal and anal sex to be equally enjoyable.
Also good stats. Yeah. I mean, I think I wonder in you said it was 77% have bad experiences. Was that the right number?
Had a negative. Yep.
But I wonder how much of the time that is due to just simply not being educated and just kind of like